All cost overruns or delays, and this is the question that's on the ballot, whether you support a design bid build or not, rests at the feet of the owner, in this case, the City of Regina or taxpayers. There is no guarantee. There's some discussion that you can have a fixed price contract for design bid build, but you cannot. You cannot have that. What's called a design build, a variation of that, that's the first step towards a public-private partnership. So the classic way of building things is difficult when you have limited resources, crushing needs for infrastructure and growth, and a limited amount of revenue by way of property taxes. We believe on balance, this is absolutely the way to go. No question about it. So I'm asking you to trust City Council, the due diligence that we did. Wayne, you spoke of the work that Council does to do this on your behalf. We've taken this extremely seriously, all of us. And we want you to know we've done the right thing for you. We're absolutely confident. Every one of us, 11 of us, twice more of us. So we're asking you, when you see the ballot, to reject the notion of design bid build, in this case only, and go with a public-private partnership. We will save $58.5 million from the federal government. That will be part of the cost of covering this, a quarter of the cost. If we don't do that, if we go to design bid build, you will know that your taxes will go up, your utility rates will go up by $276 a year for 4 years to cover the cost and to pay it back by the time that the facility is built. Now, those in fixed incomes, those on pensions, this is not a good place to be. We don't have to be there. We've done our homework, we've done our due diligence, this is the way to go. So next, if you want to vote in the advanced polls on Saturday, please do so at all the malls around the city. Or if you vote on election day, a referendum day next week on Wednesday, likely the place that you voted last time in the fall. Please get out and vote. Please be engaged. Please vote no. Accept the work done by the City of Regina. We worked very hard on your behalf for a number of years. Thank you very much for the opportunity. I know we'll have other exchanges of discussions here, but I welcome the opportunity. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Holmes.
Mr. Holmes, 30 seconds before the time that you'll stand up.
Okay, thank you very much. So I want to thank the Gyro Club for this important debate. It seems to be a tradition of yours to sponsor these important public events, and I would like to commend you for that. I want to start by saying that almost all the water and wastewater treatment plants in the world are owned and operated publicly. I noticed I went to the website that Gyro is 101 years old, 1912, and so I think you need to be congratulated for that. It was about 100 years ago that Regina actually began collecting sewage in a modern day. That's not an insult. The British Medical Journal said that the provision of modern sewage treatment services provided more to human health than all of the other advances in medicine in the last 170 years. So think of all the medical breakthroughs. The most important one for your health is proper sewage treatment. Water and wastewater was and remains essential to life. Now, from this discussion, it's just sewage. Wastewater is 99% water. Well, what comes out of your house? You shower, flush, water goes down there. Washing dishes and laundry, those are the big contributors to the wastewater treatment system. We discharge our wastewater system into the water source of hundreds of thousands of people to the east of us, all the way up to Portage. In turn, there are about 1.5 million people living to the west of us who are discharging their wastewater into what becomes our water source. And we say we all share a very serious responsibility to make sure we respect that essential resource. None of our major competitors, Saskatoon, Calgary, Edmonton, have privatized their water or wastewater systems. For instance, Yorkton, which has a population of about 17,000, built a new water treatment plant in 2012 for environmental innovation. They did it as a traditional design bid build, what we are advocating for Regina. They had federal government funding, but it was not a P3, and they borrowed in on time and on budget. Democratically controlled and publicly financed water and wastewater is a public sector success story. We think the privatization of water, wastewater, is a very bad public policy. And I'm trying to give you some reasons tonight, the 10 reasons why we shouldn't do that. The first one, you heard the mayor talk about, we will own and control the plant. There's no question we will own the plant. We will hold the title to that plant. But we will not control the operation of that plant. And the city's own consultant is very clear. If you look at the Lloyd report, page 5, they say you are transferring all of the employees from city employment over to become employees of the private contractor. On page 15, and then twice in their conclusions on page 23, they say, if you are not prepared to transfer operational responsibility for this plant to the private contractor, the private corporation, then do not pursue a P3 model, because that's the condition. That's what we're paying them for. That's what we're hiring them for, is to run that plant. Okay, so that's the first issue. Second thing we're concerned about is the lack of an independent evaluation. When I'm going out to buy something, I always listen really carefully to what the salespeople are telling me, because they always have lots more information than I do about the product. But it's always buyer beware. And be clear that Deloitte is selling privatization. It's a big part of their business. They are a sponsoring member of the Canadian Council for Public-Private Partnerships. And from their website, the council is a proponent of evidence-based policy in support of P3s. They only gather half the story. And that's what Deloitte did. They built a case for privatization. We would suggest that Deloitte has the same relationship with the P3s that the water rating companies did to toxic mortgage securities. That is, they are selling what they were supposed to be evaluating. When the Deloitte report came out in January, we asked for the information, the business plan, what was behind that. And the response to our access to information request was heavily redacted. The key information was withheld. The pages were blank. You can find it on the city's website, page after page, white page, the information removed from. We say we need to know, not in exact figures, but in ballpark figures, what they call a sensitivity analysis, high, low, medium, what this is going to cost us, how much higher the private borrowing rates are going to be, what kind of return on equity they're going to expect. Now, no one has more experience with this type of P3 models than Britain. Both the Conservative and Labour Party have promoted them extensively since 1992. In 2011, an all-party committee of the British House of Commons, the Treasury Committee. Treasury Committee oversees Her Majesty's Treasury, Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs, and the Bank of England. Okay, this is not a lightweight committee, and it has representatives from all the parties. That's what they said. The difference in finance costs means that P3 projects are always more expensive to fund over the life of a project. This represents a significant cost to taxpayers. I've heard the mayor claim that the difference between public and private borrowing is insignificant. So our first question is, if it's so insignificant, why is it being kept secret? The next question we have, I guess, is the next issue we would like to relate to speak to, is that the excuse we've been given for not releasing these ballpark figures is that that would undermine the bidding process. But we're talking ballpark. Right? The bidders know what the city's borrowing rate is. They know how much higher their own borrowing rates are. They know their expectation of return on capital. So the only people who are being kept in the dark here are the voters of Regina. The fourth one is that we're saying is that we are paying for private profit. Taxpayers are paying for that. The mayor talked about the money coming from the federal government. If you look at the Deloitte report, they will acknowledge that the starting point is the traditional public tendering, the DBB, is cheaper until you start to add in something called value for money or risk transfer, and until you take a look at the PPP grant. But that means the PPP grant, it comes from the federal government. No, it doesn't come from the federal government. It came out of our pockets once, and the federal government just has to be hanging on to it for us. And we think we should have access to that without any strings attached. So that money will come here, and what it will go for is to create what's in effect going to be a private, unregulated monopoly on this service. I suggest to you that a private monopoly is a monstrosity, and it is a recipe for price gouging and for the loss of democratic accountability. Our tax laws, these federal tax laws, are not going to give us a better plan, but we're going to get, the people are going to do a better deal, the investors are going to get a better rate of return out of that. That's because the higher financing costs are going to wipe out the federal grant. Okay? Remember, the private corporation is not bringing any new money in this deal. They're only borrowing money in our name. Okay? And we're going to pay it back, as the mayor said, through the water bills, and city council will set those rates. But private borrowing is higher cost borrowing. Okay? And the problem is how much higher that is going to be is a secret. We commissioned an economist, Hugh McKenzie, to look at that. He used very cautious figures to analyze the project. And he came up with a figure of $95.9 million more. So the whole federal grant is wiped out over the life of this project, not in one sweep, but over the life of this project. And we will end up higher water bills of $37.4 million, again, over a 30-year period. Okay. All those calculations McKenzie did are on our website, reginawaterwatch.ca. But they remain the only publicly available calculations of the cost of this plant. The city is still not releasing its calculations. There's still 5 pages on that document. The other question, and we talked about $20 million in savings, and actually 21.1 when I was looking at the website data, the $20 million in savings, I should remember. The trouble is that it comes from something called value for money, an analysis of the different kinds of costs you get with the public and private program. Now, the problem with that is that any credible value for money has to be open and transparent. We as citizens have to check those calculations, check the assumptions, go through the numbers. None of this is possible with the report. All of that is secret. And the Auditor General of Ontario and other provinces have criticized these value for money calculations as being the costs assigned to the public programs are excessive, the ones assigned to the private one are too low. And the British Treasury Committee raised the same concerns. Said the current value for money appraisal system is biased in favor of P3s. So there's that problem, and we just don't know what's behind those numbers. But the real risk in this is that a private corporation can always walk away from the project. They can always leave. And we know from other P3 projects, including the biggest one, which is the refurbishing of the London Underground, that in fact the corporations did walk away from it and left the city holding the bag, the transit authority holding the bag for that. Our problem is we can't walk away from our sewage. Cost overruns. In June 2012, when this was first being talked about, the cost of this plant was supposed to be $153 million. Okay. 14 months later, it's $234 million. That 234, that's not the number the mayor used. The 234 includes $10 million in fees to lawyers and brokers and consultants that the city's never mentioned in any of its documents. And if you're wondering about why I have this discrepancy, remember the figure of $58.5 million we're getting from the federal government? That is a quarter of the amount of the project. And Ms. Steph taught me in grade 4, taught me how to do math. And if you multiply 58.5 by 4, you get $234 million. That's the cost of the plant. It's like when the airlines used to give you those cheap fares. It's a great fare to Calgary, and then you found out there was these huge airline fees and security fees and landing fees and all those things. Now that's not illegal anymore. What airlines have to tell you up front what the all-in cost is. But the city's not doing that here. I guess what we say is that no wonder it's easy for the P3 proponents to say this is going to come in on budget, because it's already got a 50% cost overrun built right into it before we even start. The mayor said that you can't do fixed costs, that only the P3 will give you fixed price. But this is what PPP Canada says in its guide to municipalities. A private partner designs and builds the infrastructure to meet the public partner performance specifications, often for a fixed price, so the risk of the cost overruns is transferred to the private partner. And that's what we're recommending the city do here. It's not always a good idea, and I think the mayor alluded to that, to have a fixed price. Sometimes you're buying insurance for a risk that isn't that big. In this case, we need this plant by the end of 2016, and it's out there to take it out, as he said, and so it's even prudent that we would do that. When we put that up for tender, we say to the companies who are bidding, when you bring in that bid, we expect you to come in on that bid, in on that schedule, and if you don't, there will be tenders. City of Saskatoon just built a bridge, the Circle Drive South Bridge, and it came, and they built it as a fixed price contract. Now the city says that the way of the future is these P3s becoming a thing. Right? Well, we've talked already. Actually, this idea of private companies running public services goes back a couple hundred years. But the real trend right now is that the municipalities are taking them back. Just 2 weeks ago, Berlin finally took back all of its water and wastewater system after 14 years of privatization. Paris, Indianapolis, and Brussels, and Atlanta, and Hamilton all took their water systems back from the privatizers. I want to talk just for a minute about Brussels, because last night the mayor said that if the private corporation wants an excessive increase, wants more money out of us, the city will sit down to negotiate with them. If it's not justified, they won't pay. And that's what Brussels did. the private contractor wanted more money. They wanted more money to they basically made a mistake in the design of the plant, and they wanted the city to give them more money to fix the problem they created. So they sat down and did that. And what happened was the operator, Veolia, opened the taps. And the sewage flowed out into the rivers that drain out of Brussels, flowed out for 10 days. Raw sewage ran through. It's the capital of the European Union. Now, Veolia is not a fly-by-night company. You can have 10 bidders. Veolia is the largest corporation in the world, of France, does this kind of work. And that's their response if you decide you should have to tell them they can't have the increases they want. So there are examples all over the world of people taking it back, but there are also some pretty sad examples of people getting bamboozled in these kinds of projects, and that's what I want to come back to now. The mayor said this number, $276 on your taxes. No one knows where that number comes from. If you ask the city council, depending which one you ask, you'll get a different answer. This is a city council that has raised your water and sewer taxes by 70% in 7 years, or about $600 for the average family. And the big rationale for that was to save money to build this wastewater treatment plant that we very much need. And the city says on its website is that those rates of increase, increasing rates will continue about that same rate into the foreseeable future. Now the mayor said, this is this cost, and it's run over 4 years because the plant's going to be built in 4 years. No, the plant's going to be built in 3 years. We're starting in March 2014, 2015, 2016. It has to be online into 2016. So the 4-year numbers is as arbitrary as the rest. It is just a made-up number. It seems to have been created by a spin doctor. It was never voted on by council, you know that. That's the points I wanted to touch on before we left. Oh, the revenue question. And it's true that municipalities are strapped for money to revitalize infrastructure. And it's also true that we all said that the federal government should be helping because they have the tax dollars, right? They collect those from us and they have better sources than we do. But the water and utility budget is something very different than your property tax. And there's a $40 million surplus in that fund. We have the money to pay for this project. So just to put this into constant perspective, I've got 2 granddaughters. One started grade 5, the other one started grade 1, full days. When this project is finished, they will be 40 and 37 years old. We think we have a responsibility to future generations and to our environment to keep this in public hands. Thank you. Thank you.
The first question is from the mayor to Mr. Holmes. Mr. Holmes, why do you keep telling residents that the city is privatizing water and the sewage treatment plant when that, in fact, is not the case?
I have never told.
Can you go to the...
Oh, sure, I certainly can.
It seems to be there are 2 parts to that question. So the first question is, it is about the wastewater treatment plant.
That's what we're talking about. We're not talking about water. Water comes from Buffalo Pound. The water in comes from Buffalo Pound. The water out goes up to the wastewater treatment plant. And when we did our petition, that's what it was called, the wastewater treatment plant petition. And that's the question, right? That we should build that plant, build, finance, and operate, and maintain it. Finance, operate, and maintain it publicly. So that's the question. Why do I say we're privatizing it? Because privatizing means a lot of things. One of them is obviously transfer of ownership, and that's not what we're doing here. That's not on the table. What we are doing here is we're turning over a service that was publicly delivered not for profit, but just as a service. And we are changing that into a service which will be delivered by a private corporation, which will make a profit out of that. And that is clearly, in the dictionary, not all the dictionaries, most of the dictionaries I've looked at, that is the definition of privatization. Privatization is a very slippery word, and we talked about that a little bit last night. At one point, we had a government here that was very excited about privatization, but they didn't call it that. It's called public participation. We had a minister of public participation, and we had a department of public participation. and they left us with a crushing debt load that we're still trying to get up from underneath. So there are various ways of doing that, but the key thing about this is a service that was a public service, not for profit, funded the cost necessary to keep it going. And now it's going to be run differently, and someone's going to take a profit out of that in our mind is privatization. So I think we've been clear about that, and they brought those definitions and brought those definitive dictionaries to council a number of times. I think it's clear enough. I mean, there are many meanings to that word.
Thank you.